I was wiping grease off my hands when I saw her again. Same time as last week, early afternoon, when the shop was quiet enough to hear the old wall clock tick. She stood on the sidewalk across the street, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, holding a paper bag from the corner bakery. I pretended to check the tires on a customer's car, but she didn't move, just looked. It was the way she did it, not openly staring, not smiling either. Her eyes flicked over me like she was measuring something, then slid away, like she'd already decided she knew. She'd been coming by more lately, not always stopping, sometimes just walking past with that deliberate pace, the kind of walk that says she's not in a hurry for anyone. The first time, I thought she was lost. The second time, I noticed she always glanced at my hands. This time, she crossed the street. "Do you fix more than cars?" she asked, voice low, almost lazy. I blinked. Depends what's broken." She smiled, just one corner of her mouth lifting. "The latch on my back gate. It sticks." I should have said yes right away. Business is business. But the way she leaned against the doorframe of the shop made the words stick in my throat. Up close, she had the kind of face you don't forget. Not because it's perfect. There was a faint line above her lip, a freckle on her cheek, but because it looked like it had lived through more than you'd ever get out of her in one sitting. "I can take a look," I said finally. Her eyes held mine a half-second too long. "Good." She gave me an address. I wrote it on the back of an invoice, even though I'd probably remember it without trying. When she turned to leave, something in me wanted to ask her name. But I didn't. Felt like the wrong time. Or maybe the right time to keep it to myself. The rest of the day I worked with a strange edge in my chest, like I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't. Every time I caught a whiff of the bakery smell drifting through the open door, I thought of her. How she didn't fidget, didn't fill silences the way most people do. It was closing time when I saw her again, this time standing on her porch across the street from my apartment. I hadn't realized she lived there. She was leaning against the railing, a cup in her hand, watching. I froze in the middle of locking my truck. Then she said it. "I watch you too." Her voice carried just enough across the road for me to hear. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just said it like she was stating the weather. And then she turned and went inside. I stood there longer than I should have, feeling the street go quiet around me, the smell of cooling asphalt mixing with the faint trace of her words. That night, I kept replaying her voice in my head, like I missed something, or maybe wanted something. I showed up at her place the next afternoon with a small toolkit. The address she'd given me wasn't just across the street. It was the tall, narrow house with peeling green paint I'd walked past 100 times without wondering who lived there. She answered the door in a loose white shirt, sleeves rolled halfway, a faint crease at the collar like she'd been wearing it for hours. "You're early," she said, not accusing, just stating. "Didn't think you'd mind." She stepped aside, letting me in. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and something warm, maybe cinnamon. There were framed photos on the wall, none of them recent. People in older clothes, a man with his arm around her, a little boy grinning at the camera. "The gate's out back," she said, already walking ahead. She didn't ask if I wanted water, didn't make small talk. Just led me through the kitchen, where a half-finished cup sat beside an open book. The latch was rusted, stubborn. I knelt, working it loose, aware of her presence a few feet away. She stood with one arm resting on the post, watching but not in that steady way she'd done across the street. More distracted. "You do this a lot?" she asked. "Fix things." "MMH." "Yeah," I said, twisting the screwdriver. "Keeps me busy." She gave a small nod, but her eyes had drifted toward the far corner of the yard, like something out there had caught her attention. Her hands, I noticed them when she pushed her hair back, were delicate but rough at the knuckles, the nails short, the kind of hands that had worked for a living. "You live here alone?" I asked before thinking. A pause. "Mostly." The way she said it made me want to ask who mostly was. But I didn't. She stepped closer, maybe to see the latch, maybe to stop me from asking. I caught the faintest trace of perfume, worn down by the day. "You're good at this," she murmured after a while. "It's just a latch." She didn't answer. I looked up and caught something in her face. Not quite sadness, but a heaviness that didn't belong to the moment. It was gone almost as soon as I saw it. I finished tightening the last screw, tested the gate. There. Shouldn't stick anymore. "Thank you." She said it softly, like she wasn't talking about the gate. I packed my tools, and for a second, neither of us moved. She stood with her arms crossed loosely, her gaze fixed somewhere near my shoulder. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but didn't, and that silence felt louder than words. It started raining halfway through the evening. The kind of rain that makes the streetlights look softer, like they're underwater. I'd been working late at the shop when the power flickered, then went out. She called me 15 minutes later. "The gate's fine," she said, "but the storm took out half my lights. Can you?" Her voice trailed off, and I didn't need the rest of the sentence. When I got there, she'd lit a couple of candles in the kitchen. The shadows made the room feel smaller, pulling the walls in closer. She was barefoot, wearing a sweater that hung loose at the collar, one shoulder bare without meaning to be. "Breakers in the basement," she said, leading me down narrow steps that smelled faintly of damp wood. I worked by flashlight, flipping switches until the hum of the fridge came back. "Thanks," she murmured when we climbed back up, but she didn't turn on the lights. Instead, she set 2 mugs on the table. Coffee, still warm enough. We sat across from each other, steam curling between us. The rain was louder now, rattling against the windows. I could hear the faint sound of a clock ticking somewhere in the house. She asked about the shop, my family, whether I'd always lived here. Her questions weren't casual. She listened, holding her mug like she needed the heat. I wanted to ask about the photos on her wall, about the man and the boy, but it felt like touching a bruise I didn't have the right to touch. When she laughed at something I said, it was short, almost surprised, and her hand brushed mine on the table. Neither of us moved right away. That was when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and whatever was in her face shut down in an instant. She set the phone face down, not answering. "You should," she started, then stopped. Her eyes flicked toward the window, then back to me. I leaned in a little without thinking. The candlelight caught in her eyes, and I thought, for half a second, that she was going to tell me something. Maybe the thing she hadn't said in the yard. The rain kept going, the space between us shrinking without either of us moving our chairs. My hand was halfway to hers when she said, "You should go now," and I did. But only my body left that room. I hadn't planned on seeing her that night. I was walking back from the corner store, rain still clinging to the pavement, when I noticed her porch light on. She was sitting on the steps, arms around her knees, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. "You're out late," I said, stopping at the edge of her walkway. "So are you." She didn't invite me in, but she didn't tell me to leave either. I sat on the step below hers, the wood still damp from earlier rain. For a while, we just listened to the hum of traffic in the distance. "You ever feel like you're waiting for something, but you don't know what?" she asked suddenly. I glanced up at her. "Yeah, lately." She nodded like that was enough. Her hair was down, a little messy, and in the porch light I saw the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. Not from smiling, from squinting into too many days that didn't go the way she wanted. "I don't know what we're doing," I said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Her hands tightened around her sleeves, then loosened again. "Neither do I." It was the most direct thing either of us had said. No small talk to buffer it, no sideways glances to make it lighter. The silence after that was thick, but not empty. The air between us felt heavier than the night air should. I could hear her breathing, slow and careful, like she was buying herself time. People would talk. she said eventually. They already do, I replied before I could stop myself. Her eyes found mine, and I couldn't look away. There was no smirk, no guarded tilt of her head, just an unshaken stare, like she was trying to see where the edges of me stopped. This isn't, she started, then stopped, shaking her head. Isn't what? She exhaled, a small laugh that didn't have any humor in it. Safe. We stayed like that for a long moment, her on the higher step, me looking up, the space between us smaller than it had any right to be. I wanted to reach for her, not to close the space, but to make sure she was real, that this wasn't just some loop in my head I'd been running for weeks. But my hands stayed in my lap. She didn't say anything, just looked at me, like she was already mourning something we never even had. I didn't see her for over a week. Her porch stayed dark, blinds drawn, mailbox filling up. I told myself it wasn't my business, but I caught myself looking for her anyway, when I left for work, when I came back, even in the middle of the night. Then one evening, I found an envelope tucked under my apartment door. No name on the front, but I knew her handwriting the second I saw it. Just an address, hers, and tonight written in the corner. When I knocked, she didn't answer right away. I almost turned to leave when the door opened. She looked tired, not in the long day way but in the carrying something for years way. Come in, she said. The living room was dim except for one lamp. On the coffee table was a stack of old photographs. Black and white, some faded color. She picked one up and handed it to me. A man stood in the middle of a field, grinning. Same freckle on the cheek. Same tilt of the head when he smiled. He was 24, she said. We were supposed to leave this town together. But he didn't make it to 25. I kept looking at the photo even though my pulse had changed. You mean, you move like him, she said quietly. And sometimes you laugh the same way. Stupid, I know. I'm not saying you are him, She shook her head, pressing the heel of her hand to her eyes. I think that's why I noticed you before I even realized I had. I didn't know what to say. The air felt heavier, but not with the same tension as before. This was different, more fragile. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I don't want you thinking I'm playing some game. She glanced at me then, holding my gaze just long enough for me to see how much effort it took. And because you deserve to know why I've been. She trailed off. I set the photo back on the table, careful not to touch the others. She stood there, sleeves pushed up, hair a little messy, like she'd been pacing before I came. We didn't move closer. We didn't touch. But something shifted in that quiet. Not the kind of shift you notice in the moment, but the kind you only realize later was the start of something else entirely. She took a breath like she hadn't allowed herself to in years. And for the first time, she looked at me without fear. It was late when I saw her light on again. A single lamp, the rest of the house in shadow. I didn't knock this time. Just stood at the edge of her porch until she opened the door. You were out here a while, she said. Not a question. Didn't want to rush it. She stepped back, letting me in. The room smelled faintly of rain drifting in through a cracked window. There was no coffee on the table this time, no stack of photos. Just the two of us, and a kind of calm that felt strange after weeks of push and pull. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first. She pulled her knees up, rested her chin on them, and studied me in that quiet way of hers. I don't know what this is, she said, her voice steady but softer than usual. But I stopped trying to make it fit into something familiar a while ago. I nodded, not because I understood completely, but because I understood enough. There was no rush to speak after that. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the occasional creak of the old house, those filled the space. I noticed the lines in her hands again, the faint scar at her wrist, the way her breathing had slowed since I'd come in. I think about you more than I should, I admitted, not looking at her. She didn't respond right away. I felt the couch shift slightly as she moved closer. Not much, just enough that her knee brushed against mine. We both know this doesn't make sense, she murmured. Yeah. And yet, the unfinished thought hung between us. I didn't try to finish it. After a while, her hand found mine. Not searching, not asking, just settling there like it belonged. Her thumb moved once against my skin, and it felt like the most deliberate thing in the world. We stayed like that for a long time. No leaning in, no cinematic kiss, just breathing the same air, our shoulders nearly touching. Something in her posture changed. The way her back eased into the couch, the faint lift of her chin. When she finally looked at me, it wasn't guarded. It wasn't testing. It was open. She didn't say she loved me, but she let her guard down. And that was louder than any "I love you" ever could be. It's been months since that night on her couch. I still cross the street to her house, though less in a rush now. Some days we talk for hours, other days we just sit in the same room, her reading, me pretending to read. It's not what I thought it would be, but that's the thing. Nothing about her has been what I thought it would be. We never made rules for this. We never gave it a name. There's a freedom in that, I guess. Or maybe it's just that we stopped needing to make sense of it. She's softer now, but not weaker. She laughs more. I don't think I caused that. I think she just let herself start again. And me? I've learned how much can live inside a quiet moment. How you can care for someone without trying to own them. The night she told me about the man in the photograph, I thought it meant she was stuck in the past. I see it differently now. It wasn't about holding on. It was about making space for something new without erasing what came before. That's harder than starting fresh. We still have long silences. Sometimes they feel heavy, sometimes they feel like home. The day I realized I loved her, it wasn't during some big moment. We were just in her kitchen, her hair pulled back, sunlight catching in the lines around her eyes. She was telling me about a book she'd finished, not even looking at me. And I knew, quietly, without needing to say it. And maybe that's what this whole thing has been teaching me. That love isn't always the loudest thing in the room. Sometimes it's the steady hum in the background you don't notice until it's been there long enough to become part of you. I don't know where we'll be in a year. I don't think either of us needs to. But I do know I've stopped waiting for the right time. Every time I'm with her feels like it's enough. The woman across the street once told me, "I watch you too." I didn't know then how much it would change the way I moved through the world. I see more now. I notice more. And maybe, just maybe, I let myself be seen too. If you've ever met someone who made you slow down, really slow down, you know what I'm talking about. So, have you?